Hey everybody, I'm Mr. Mills, and today we're going to be talking about using the quadratic formula, maybe one of my favorite things in all of Algebra 2. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and write out what the quadratic formula is. Okay, so the quadratic formula is an equation, a beautiful equation, mind you, that solves equations that look like this: ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Right? And so this is called a quadratic equation. And the reason I know it's a quadratic is because the highest term is an x squared term, meaning quadratic. Okay? So we do have a general formula to solve these quadratic equations, and we call that the quadratic formula. I'm going to go ahead and write that here. And so the quadratic formula is x equals the opposite of b, negative b, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, and that is all divided by 2a, right? This is my quadratic formula here. It's the one that I was thinking about tattooing it on my left bicep, okay? So this formula here I can use to solve any quadratic in the world. How exciting, right? Okay, so the biggest thing to understand about the quadratic formula is that understand and recognize that this equation here equals 0, right? So I have to get everything onto one side of the equation so that I have this equation that equals 0, right? And if I don't do that, then unfortunately the quadratic formula would not work for me, right? But we're all smart enough. We know that, hey, we got to move everything to one side of the equation, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and start with this first example here. 4x squared minus 6x equals negative 2. Okay? And I am going to use the quadratic equation to try to solve for x in this equation, right? So like I said, I need to know that everything needs to be on one side of the equation. So I'm going to go ahead and move this negative 2 over to the other side, that darn negative 2. So let's add 2 to both sides, okay? So when I add 2, I get 4x squared minus 6x plus 2 equals 0, okay? And so now everything is on one side of the equal sign. So I can go ahead and I'm going to identify what are my a, b, and c in the problem. Okay. So a is the number in front of the x squared. So a is 4. B is the number with the x term, the linear term. So b is negative 6. And then c is the constant at the end, positive 2. Okay? So now let's take these three values and substitute them in to my quadratic formula. Okay? So to start with, I need the opposite of b. So I need the opposite of negative 6, which the opposite of negative 6, I think we know, is positive 6, plus or minus the square root of, okay? And then I need b squared. So I need negative 6 squared. And I'm going to write that negative 6 in parentheses because I don't want to get confused with my negatives. They trick us sometimes. Okay? So b squared minus 4ac. So minus 4 times a is also 4. And then c is 2. Okay, so I have opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac so far. And I still need all over 2 times a is 4. Okay. All right, so now let's start simplifying this thing one step at a time. So I'm going to simplify the inside of this radical first because it looks pretty ugly. So I still have my 6 plus or minus square root of negative 6 squared is 36. okay? And then minus 4 times 4 is 16, times 2 is 32. And that's all over 2 times 4 is 8. This is coming out nicely. Okay, and then let's move this thing up here. All right, so now I have, I really just have this 36 minus 32. So I still got my 6 plus or minus the square root of 36 minus 32 is 4. So 4, that's all over 8. Okay, and now the square root of 4 is a really nice number. It's a perfect square, right? So the square root of 4 is just 2, right? So I take the square root of 4 and I get 2, okay? And then that's all still over 8, right? So, and now since I have this plus or minus in here, it really means, hey, I have 2 answers. One of them is 6 plus 2 divided by 8, and the other one is 6 minus 2 divided by 8, okay? So let's go ahead and find both of our answers. To do that, let's do, one will be 6 plus 2 over 8, and the other one is 6 minus 2 over 8, right? So that plus or minus splits it up into 2 different problems, really. So this first one, 6 plus 2 over 8. 6 plus 2 is 8 over 8, which is just 1. That's one of my answers. And then my other answer is 6 minus 2 over 8. 6 minus 2 is 4 over 8. And then 4 over 8 reduces to 1 over 2, 1/2. Okay, so I really have 2 different answers here, x equals 1 and x equals 1/2. I'm just going to leave it as x equals 1 and 1/2. That's okay with me. Okay, and so then that's just one example. The second one is really the same type of thing, except now I think I'm going to have that dang imaginary unit I in there, okay? But let's work through it and just try to find it, okay? So this one is a little easier from the start because it already equals 0, so I don't have to move anything over or anything like that. So I can just start recognizing my A, B, and C. Okay, so A is the number out front that's in front of the x squared. So A is just 1 because it's really just 1x squared, right? B is the number, the linear term, the number that's just with the x. So B is -4. Okay, and then lastly, C is the constant at the end, so that is just 13. Okay, now let's go ahead and take these A, B, and C and substitute them into our quadratic formula. So I need opposite of B, so the opposite of -4 is +4, plus or minus the square root of B squared, so -4 squared. And again, I'm going to put that -4 in parentheses so I don't get confused with the negative. So B squared minus 4AC, so -4 times A is 1, and C is 13. 13, there we go. Okay, and then remember that is all over 2A. So 2 times 1. Hey, 2 times 1, that's nice. Okay, and then next, I'm going to start simplifying underneath the radical. Looks really messy to me, so I still got my 4 plus or minus out front. Okay, and then underneath, I have -4 squared. If you're using your calculator, remember that -4 needs to be in parentheses because this is +16. Okay, and then -4 times 1 times 13. 4 times 1 is 4, and then times 13 is, I believe, 52. So -52. Okay, and then that's all over 2. All right, and we're almost done here. I have a 16 minus 52. Uh-oh, I think I see a negative. So 4 plus or minus the square root of 16 minus 52, I believe, is 36, -36, sorry. okay? And then that's all over 2. Now we're almost done here. The problem right now is that we have this negative on the inside, and that negative underneath the radical is a problem right now. Remember, if you're taking the square root of a negative number, the first thing you got to do is pop out the I, okay? So to simplify the square root of negative 36, first of all, we all know that the square root of 36 is just 6, okay? But then, because I have that negative in there, I have to pop out the I. So the square root of negative 36 is 6I, okay? That I just kind of tags along. So 4 plus or minus 6I over 2, okay? And then now I really just have one more step here. Because there's an I in there, I can't really do a whole lot more, right? Because that's that lateral unit, the complex unit, the imaginary, right? And so the only thing I can really do is I have a 4, a 6, and a 2. I think all those 3 integers are divisible by 2, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. So this 4 plus or minus 6i divided by 2, that simplifies down to 2 plus or minus 3i. Okay, and that is my final answer down there. I have 2 solutions. One of them is 2 plus 3i, and the other one is 2 minus 3i, right? But because there's an I in there, I'm not worried about breaking it up into 2 because I can't really do much else, okay? And that's going to be all for today. Again, that's solving quadratics with the quadratic formula. Maroon Pride. Thank you.